or as late as March. Christians came to celebrate on December the 25th because cultures around the Mediterranean and across Europe observe feasts on or around December the 25th, marking the winter solstice. The dates of maximum tilt of the sun to the Earth's equator. So what do we know about December the 21st?
25th?
What do we know about December the 21st? Does anybody know?
First day of winter?
What about that day? What do we know about that day? Is it the shortest day of the year or the longest day of the year? And what about June the 21st? It's the longest day of the year. The Jews had a festival of lights. Germans had a Yule, and Yule means winter festival. Celtic legends connected the solstice with Balder, the Scandinavian sun god who was struck down by a mistletoe arrow. Now there's an interesting phenomenon about this, because in that tradition you hold up a piece of mistletoe and you kiss somebody underneath the mistletoe. Well, I'd be afraid to kiss somebody if an arrow was coming. At the pagan festival of Saturnalia, Romans feasted and gave gifts to the poor. Drinking was closely connected with these pagan feasts. And by no offense, if you know any Irish Catholics, I've known a few in my life. When you go and celebrate Christmas with them, most of them are drunk by the time before Santa Claus gets there. So they think they're seeing something when the little man comes down the chimney. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I'm having some fun here. It's okay to laugh. But I want you to recognize that how can drinking be associated with something so divine? Some believe a Christian bishop may have adopted the day to keep his people from indulging in the old pagan festival. Modern Yule traditions include decorating a fir or spruce tree, burning a Yule log, hanging mistletoe and holly branches, giving gifts, and general celebrations and merriment. Christians stole the holiday, claiming it was a day to celebrate Jesus Christ's birthday, and called it Christmas, but in turn still used the same traditions as the pagan holiday. According to medieval English writer, the Venerable Bede, Christian missionaries sent to proselytize among the Germanic peoples of Northern Europe were instructed to superimpose Christian themes upon existing local pagan holidays to ease the conversion of the people to Christianity by allowing them to retain their traditional celebrations. I was very blessed to do a wedding this weekend in Tampa. I was blessed to do another wedding last weekend, and inshallah another wedding on the 9th. The question that I was asked the most is, are we allowed to say Merry Christmas to our Christian friends? It's every place I went. So this is why I read this to you, and this is why I'm giving you this presentation. Christmas was created by associating stories of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, the central figure in Christianity, with the existing pagan Yule celebrations, similar to the formation of Halloween and All Saints' Day via Christianization of existing pagan traditions. I just want you to know where it comes from. Know the truth about it. It doesn't mean that that's what those people are celebrating, though. I can tell you that my beloved grandmother, who I decorated her tree every year till I became a Muslim, never had a clue of where that tree came from or where the tradition came from. And that wasn't her intention in her heart.
I found a lot of people just do it because that's what everyone else is doing. They truly don't understand the meaning of the tree or anything, that it's pagan or whatever.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So we don't want to judge them. Can you judge somebody who doesn't know what they're doing? That's just called ignorance. Not in a derogatory way. It just means they don't know.
And nobody wants to know. I don't want to know.
Well, I would disagree. We've had Christians come in this class. I saw you, brother, just a second. And they had no idea, and they were very happy to learn about where all this came from. There are people that love history. My question to you is, have you presented it?
I tried.
You know? Because so many people say they don't want to know, but then they never really offered it.
Nope.
Have you shared the Christmas story according to the Quran? That's what we have to do. That's the importance of this class. That yes, brother, you had your hand up.
So if you know the pagan tradition, and you ask the question, are you allowed to wish them a Merry Christmas? Myself, working in the call center, people do that to me. I just say you have a good day. You have a good rest of your day, because I know the pagan tradition, so that's something I won't say to them.
Well, what I say to people is, yes, I am a Muslim and we celebrate Jesus. Because that's the verses I read to you in the Quran that say that. We absolutely celebrate Jesus, but we don't celebrate Christmas.
Happy holidays.
Yeah. So you have the right to do what you want to do. I'm just providing you with all the verses in the Quran to teach you about how we do celebrate Jesus. But we don't celebrate pagan rituals. But we do celebrate Jesus.
What do you celebrate?
Can you explain?
Did you not hear the verse in the Quran that I read? Let me read it again to you. Because I pulled these verses and I asked you to come with an open mind. I asked you to listen to what Islam really says about Jesus. Not your preconceived ideas, not your prejudices, not maybe your hatred for another people. We have to open our hearts to see what the Quran says. Look, listen to this. The name Jesus is mentioned 25 times in the Quran. We are told in very clear words how blessed and joyful the event of his birth is for the whole of human family. Look up chapter 19, verse 33. We are told that his birth is blessed and joyful.
But we don't know when his birthday is.
That's not what I'm saying. Have I once said that? Anyone in the class, have I said that?
We celebrate.
I didn't say his birthday. I said we celebrate the birth of that prophet. And the Quran says that is a blessed and joyful event. That the birth of this prophet was a blessed and joyful event. Does it say that or not?
Yes.
It does say that. Thank you, sister.
How many times is he mentioned in the Quran?
25 times. He's actually mentioned by names more times than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If that's not a celebration of a prophet, what is? I did not say his birthday. But we celebrate Jesus. We say, our Quran said it is a blessed and joyful event, his birth.
Which surah, brother?
Surah 19, verse 33. So back to the Christmas tree, wreaths, and garlands. Long before the Advent, I'm challenging you because you can use this for dawah. But if you resist because of what ignorant people have told you and don't read the Quran for what it says, then you will not be a very effective da'i. And you are promoting hate sometimes. Did I once say to say Merry Christmas?
I do.
But we do celebrate Christ. It says in the Quran, I'm going to say it again, chapter 19, verse 33, that his birth was a blessed and joyful event.
But it doesn't say in this translation.
Okay, brother, what does it say in that
It
translation?
says, "So peace is on me that day I was born, the day that I died.
Okay, so if peace is
And the day
upon
that I
him,
shall be raised up to life."
is he a prophet of God? Is Jesus a prophet of God?
Yes.
Is he a messenger of God?
Yes.
Was he born immaculate conception?
Yes.
Is that a miracle?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. Long before the advent of Christianity, plants and trees that remain green all year had a special meaning for people in the winter. Just as people today decorate their homes during the festive season with pine, spruce, and fir trees. Ancient peoples hung evergreen boughs over their doors and windows. In many countries, it was believed that evergreens would keep away witches, ghosts, evil spirits, and illness. We say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. We know that only by God can any kind of negativity be kept away from you. Not by any mistletoe, or any kind of tree, or any created thing. In the northern hemisphere, the shortest day and longest night of the year falls on December the 21st or December the 22nd and is called the winter solstice. Many ancient people believed that the sun was a god and that winter came every year because the sun god had become sick and weak. They celebrated the solstice because it meant that at last the sun god would begin to get well. Evergreen boughs reminded them of all the green plants that would grow again when the sun god was strong and summer would return. The ancient Egyptians worshipped a god called Ra, who had the head of a hawk and wore the sun as a blazing disc in his crown. At the solstice, when Ra began to recover from the illness, the Egyptians filled their homes with green palm rushes, which symbolized for them the triumph of life over death. Early Romans marked the solstice with a feast called the Saturnalia in honor of Saturn.
Slide.
Oh, sorry about that. The Romans knew that the solstice meant that soon farms and orchards would be green and fruitful. To mark the occasion, they decorated their homes and temples with evergreen boughs. In northern Europe, the mysterious Druids, the priests of the ancient Celts, also decorated their temples with evergreen boughs as a symbol of everlasting life. The fierce Vikings in Scandinavia thought that evergreens were the special plant of the sun god Balder. So if you can gather this history, you have a conversation, and if you do it with beautiful words and eloquent speech, you may be able to help somebody see what they actually got lost in. If you do it with beautiful words and eloquent speech. Did you guys have a question or? Okay. Yes, brother.
I do have a comment. In the Quran it says God leads those whom He wills, and those who go astray whom He wills. So I'm not sure how to do this, because these people go astray, and Allah, it's like, what use is it to let these people know when their hearts are hardened or sealed?
Do you know that their heart is sealed?
In the Quran, yes. I don't know if their heart is sealed, but I know.
What is your responsibility from Allah? To invite people to Islam.
Right.
You don't know whether Allah is going to call them or He's not going to call them. It does not change your responsibility. Let me tell you that I was very ignorant. But I was called. I was lost. I was on the brink of the hellfire. And God called me. It's our responsibility to invite people with beautiful words and eloquent speech, and nobody is exempt from that. There's no excuse. Yes, we know that it's Allah that calls people to Islam, but our purpose is to call people to Islam. If you remember a few weeks, I talked about the verse that said we are to do what the messengers did. What did the messengers do? They called people to the worship of one God. How much more equipped are you if you know the truth of where things came from? Instead of just arguing with people from what you don't know, I'm trying to give you some food so that you have a big, healthy appetite. And when you see people, now I know what to talk about. I know where to come from. I come from enlightenment. I come from knowledge. Not from just, I want to be right. I want to defend my position. This is where we lose people.
Is it okay to tell the Christian if you say you're telling me I'm wrong? You can say yes, you are wrong, or you have to be like.
What does the Quran say? Invite with beautiful words and eloquent speech. That's a command of Allah. Let me ask you this. If I walk to any one of you, and I begin my conversation, you're wrong. Are you going to now open to have a conversation with me? Because you're going to start defending yourself. And I don't believe anybody in this room is different. If I walk up to you and point your finger and say, you're wrong, most people are going to defend themselves. And that's called attack-defend mode. There's nothing beautiful about that, and there's nothing eloquent about that. How many of you want your husbands or wives to come up to you and say, you're wrong? You guys dig that, right? That's how you want your husband or wife to address you? You're wrong. I don't see any hands going up now. What's wrong? A minute ago, that's how we address people. Now, what's happening here? Yes, brother. I got about 10 more slides and I got 15 minutes.
The way it comes to me, people ask me about the religion. I'll tell them, but yet it seems to still be argumentative. So what I tell them, don't believe me, go to a mosque, go to imam. I say, I'm just a layperson. If you really want to know the haqq, go to the source. That's what I tell them. But the majority of them don't want the source. They rather believe CNN is the source.
Well, that's not been my experience. I was in a church 2 weeks ago. We got an amazing letter from that minister. I got an amazing letter from a professor that I lecture in his class every semester. He used to be a Christian minister. I read the letter actually at the wedding. Dave and Kim were there. They heard the letter. I'm telling you, I may be wrong. Maybe all of you are right and I'm the only one in the choir that's wrong. But what I will say to you is this. In my experience in life, people want to hear. But they want to hear respectfully. I have 10 slides. I'd like to ask you to hold your questions. Let me finish the presentation. I ask you to come with an open heart and an open mind to listen to the Quran. You can believe anything you want. You have that right. All I'm doing is I'm putting the verses on the Quran and I'm putting the history up here. If you like it, alhamdulillah. If you don't like it, alhamdulillah. But you can't walk out of here ignorant today. You can walk out and say, well, you know, I learned something today. I learned something about the history of why this stuff is done. And I heard some verses that I need to read about and study. Because right now, I don't believe the Imam knows what he's talking about. And that's okay with me. You're not the first person that thought I didn't know what I was talking about. I'm completely okay with that. Because I have to stand before Allah. Not one of you. I have to stand before Allah. But I know we're living in a world today where we need to build bridges. Brother, did you want to say something? Because it's distracting when people are talking.
All right.
It's okay. Go ahead.
I'll say later.
Okay. Germany is credited with starting the Christmas tree tradition. As we now know it in the 16th century, actually the 21st century, but they started in the 16th century when devout Christians brought decorated trees into their homes. Some built Christmas pyramids of wood and decorated them with evergreen and candles if wood was scarce. That must have been a fire hazard. It is a widely held belief that Martin Luther, the 16th century Protestant reformer, first added lighted candles to a tree. Walking toward his home one winter evening, composing his sermon, he was awed by the brilliance of stars twinkling amidst evergreens. To recapture this scene for his family, he erected a tree in the main room and wired its branches with lighted candles. Most 19th century Americans found Christmas trees an oddity. The first record of one being on display was in the 1830s by the German settlers of Pennsylvania. although trees had been a tradition in many German homes much earlier. The Pennsylvania German settlements had community trees as early as 1747, but as late as the 1840s, Christmas trees were seen as pagan symbols and not accepted by most Americans. It is not surprising that, like many other festive Christmas customs, the tree was adopted so late in America. To the New England Puritans, Christmas was sacred. The Pilgrims' second governor, William Bradford, wrote that he tried hard to stamp out pagan mockery of the observance, penalizing any frivolity. The influential Oliver Cromwell preached against the heathen traditions of Christmas carols, decorated trees, and any joyful expression that desecrated the sacred event. In 1659, the Central Court of Massachusetts enacted a law making any observance of December the 25th other than a church service a penal offense. People were fined and for hanging decorations. That stern solemnity continued until the 19th century, when the influx of German and Irish immigrants undermined the Puritan legacy. In 1846, the popular royals, Queen Victoria and her German Prince Albert, were sketched in the Illustrated London News, standing with their children around a Christmas tree. I've actually seen Christmas cards when I was growing up that depicted that. Unlike the previous royal family, Victoria was very popular with her subjects, and what was done at court immediately became fashionable not only in Britain, but with the fashion-conscious East Coast American society. The Christmas tree had arrived. What year was that? 1846. By the 1890s, Christmas ornaments were arriving from Germany, and Christmas tree popularity was on the rise around the U.S.
Backwards.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry.
One more back.
Thank you. This thing is highly sensitive today. By the 1890s, Christmas ornaments were arriving from Germany, and Christmas tree popularity was on the rise around the U.S. It was noted that Europeans used small trees about 4 feet in height, while Americans, who usually like things bigger and better, like their Christmas trees to reach from floor to ceiling. The early 20th century saw Americans decorating their trees mainly with homemade ornaments, while the German-American sect continued to use apples, nuts, and marzipan cookies. Popcorn joined in after being dyed colors, bright colors, and interlaced with berries and nuts. Electricity brought about Christmas lights, making it possible for Christmas trees to glow for days on end. With this, Christmas trees began to appear in town squares across the country, and having a Christmas tree in the home became an American tradition. St. Nicholas. If you read up on this, he is a saint in the Catholic Church. Okay? The Catholics revere him as the gift giver. Supposedly, Nicholas was born to a wealthy family in Patara, Lycia, which is the Mediterranean coast of Turkey. His parents died and he inherited a considerable sum of money, but he kept none of it. In the most famous story about his life, he threw bags of gold through the windows of 3 girls about to be forced into lives of prostitution. At least that's the most common version of the story. There are others, including an excessively grim one, where the 3 girls are beheaded by an innkeeper and pickled in a tub of brine until Nicholas resurrects them. After a couple of miracles, he's sometimes called Nicholas the Wonder Worker, performed while he was still a boy. Nicholas was chosen by the people of Myra to be their new bishop, but it wasn't long before Diocletian and Maximian began their persecutions of Christians, and the new bishop was imprisoned. When Constantine became emperor, Nicholas was released with countless others, and returned to his preaching only to find a new threat. Arianism, and today when we think of Arianism, what do we think about?
Skinheads.
We think about skinheads. This was a different group. It wasn't the same group, okay? Arianism here was an influential heresy or hearsay denying the divinity of Christ. That's what Arians were at that time in history. According to one biographer, writing 5 centuries after Nicholas' death, thanks to the teachings of St. Nicholas, the metropolis of Myra alone was untouched by the filth of the Arian heresy, which it firmly rejected as a death-dealing poison. Other biographers claim Nicholas attacked the heresy of Arius, who denied the full divinity of Christ, in a much more personal way. He traveled to the Council of Nicaea and slapped Arius in his face. And the story goes, and this should be taken as fantasy, because there are pretty good records of the council, and Nicholas isn't even mentioned. The other bishops at Nicaea were shocked at such rude behavior and relieved him as bishop. But then Jesus and Mary appeared next to him, and they quickly recanted. Now you can see that a lot of this stuff is way out. It's way out. But this is the history. This is the history. That's the questionable legend of Nicholas, but not the end of the story. Even by the reign of Justinian, who died in 565, Nicholas was famous, and the emperor dedicated a church in Constantinople to him. By the 900s, a Greek wrote, "The West as well as the East acclaims and glorifies him. Wherever there are people, his name is revered, and churches are built in his honor." As a matter of fact, if you Google Basilia of Nicholas, you can find a whole list of churches that were named after St. Nicholas, Catholic churches. Did anybody know that?
No.
Yeah, just Basilia of Nicholas, and you'll see all of these churches. All Christians reverence his memory and call upon his protection. And really, I started to put Catholics here because most Protestant Christians do not know this. It's mostly Catholics. As a matter of fact, many Catholics wear St. Nicholas around their neck. And sometimes when a baby is born into a Catholic family, they'll put a little, what is that called that you put on a necklace? Charm? Pendant in the crib as protection. Yes. The West became even more interested when his relics were taken from Myra to Bari, Italy, on May the 9th, 1087. He's said to have been represented by medieval artists more frequently than any saint but Mary. And nearly 400 churches were dedicated in his honor in England alone during the late Middle Ages. Jasmine, have you ever seen a Basilia of St. Nicholas? I'll have to get you to follow up on that. With such a popularity, his legends inevitably became intertwined with others. In Germanic countries, it sometimes became hard to tell where the legends of Nicholas began and that of Woden or Odin, a major deity of Anglo-Saxon and continental polytheism, ended. Somewhere along the line, probably tied to the gold-giving story, people began giving presents in his name on his feast day. When the Reformation came along, his following disappeared in all the Protestant countries except Holland, where his legend continues as Sinterklaas. Martin Luther, for example, replaced this bearer of gifts with the Christ child, or in German, Christkindl. Over the years, that became repronounced Christkindl, and ironically is now considered another name for Santa Claus. So here you have the history of the trees, you have the history of Santa Claus, the mistletoe, and where all of that comes from. We now know it's very clear that it came from paganism, but it does not mean that we do not celebrate this immaculate birth of Jesus Christ. We do not celebrate his birthday, but we do celebrate his birth as divine. So alhamdulillah, the prayers at 1 o'clock. I hope you learned something today. I hope that your heart is open to receive. Sometimes it's very hard to learn new information and to absorb it when you have been taught all your life so much negativity about this great man, that you cannot be a Muslim if you don't believe in Jesus. So we will close the camera, inshallah. I love you all for the sake of Allah, and you have a question.
Is the festival of lights considered